Final Fantasy VI, the last main series Final Fantasy game before the dawn of the 3D era, and the last of the 6 games in the Pixel Remaster collection, is considered by many to be the best game of the series. 6 and 7 are the two names I tend to see get thrown around the most for best of the series, and I can understand why. I don't necessarily agree personally, but I can certainly understand why people would hail Final Fantasy VI as the best of the massive list of Final Fantasy games. I'm going to state up front that Final Fantasy VI is not my favorite game of the series. That title goes to Final Fantasy V, but it's definitely in my top 5, and it probably is the best game of the series, or at least one of. 6 does feel like the first modern Final Fantasy in a lot of ways. It saw the advent of long cutscenes, massive amounts of dialogue, and a huge number of optional quests. 4 and 5 had cutscenes, good dialogue, and optional content, but not on the scale that 6 brought. In that way, it feels like the bridge of sorts between 4 and 5's somewhat simpler gameplay and the massive, sprawling experiences that we got starting with Final Fantasy VII. 6 also introduced a villain who was not a caricature of evil like the early games, but rather a person with a personality and motivations who also happens to be purely evil to his core. Kefka is a bit of a goofy villain, but he's goofy in the same way as the Joker or John Wayne Gacy, laughing but while holding your dog's entrails. The game's story is massive, but I'll give a brief summary of the beginning. An empire in the southern part of the world has started a global war of conquest using its magicite armor, massive machines that fuse technology and magic into a behemoth of death. Much like the German Blitzkrieg in 1939 and 1940, the Imperial forces steamroll everything in their path with no one able to slow their advance. A resistance does exist, but their power is insufficient to oppose the Empire openly. That changes when 2 events occur. First, a girl enslaved by the Empire is found and hidden from them after a battle, and second, the Empire, again, like the Nazis, break a pact they had with another nation that they wrongly believe to be weak and easy prey. From there, your party grows. A lot. As you begin making your moves against the Empire. The party is both one of the best things about Final Fantasy VI, as well as one of the things I personally liked least. Depending on what you do, you have a massive party. Like, there are over a dozen playable characters. You can only use 4 at a time, though. I don't mind this if the party members not in active use still gain XP, but there are a few things I personally despise more than having to level each character when I have more characters than party slots. I just end up neglecting all but my favorite ones, which usually bites me in the ass when I find myself needing all of my party members in the late game. But I have 4 characters whose levels are in the 60s or 70s, and half a dozen whose levels are in the 20s or 30s. I also just personally don't like having that many protagonist characters to keep up with. By no means am I saying that the size of Final Fantasy VI's playable roster is a bad thing. It's objectively not. I'm just saying that it's not my personal preference. The combat system and uniqueness of each character is something that warrants a lot of praise, though. Unlike previous games where you could swap jobs at will and end up with characters that play pretty much the same, every character is specifically designed with a particular role, and no 2 characters play exactly the same. Your samurai character has unique Bushido abilities, your feral wild child can mimic the abilities of some monsters previously encountered, the little girl mage can use a magic paintbrush to use an opponent's attack against them, etc. Every character has something that makes them unique, whether that's a unique type of battle action or just different equipable weapons. The active time battle system is also smoothed out to the point of near perfection. I would still prefer a pure turn-based combat in my JRPGs, but I didn't mind the ATB system in Final Fantasy VI at all because of how polished it is. Turning from mechanics to presentation, if you've kept up with my reviews of the previous 5 Final Fantasy games, you know what I'm about to say. The Pixel Remaster's redone sprites are beautiful, the added visual effects really enhance the aesthetics and ambiance of the experience, and the redone orchestral arrangements of the soundtrack elevate the game's sound design far beyond what the original SNES release could offer. There are some modest quality of life improvements, but none that alter the core experience. Now, that could be seen as both a pro and a con, as it doesn't have some of the options that remasters of other JRPGs these days do, that speed up the experience for those who've played the game before and just want to blaze through some of the more monotonous sections. You can, however, still set some degree of a boost to XP and money gained, and you can still toggle random encounters on and off. So there are definitely some ways to expedite the monotony of the grind here. Final Fantasy VI, while not my personal favorite of the 6 games in the Pixel Remaster, definitely is the peak of 2D Final Fantasy and the best of the 6 early games. It's by far the longest of the 6 games in the Pixel Remaster, but that's because it has so much content packed into it, not because of any artificial padding. Whether this is your favorite, like mine, is a more uncommon pick, or you prefer the newer 3D Final Fantasy games, any fan of the series or of JRPGs in general is all but guaranteed to love Final Fantasy VI. This one is definitely highly recommended, and while I personally prefer Final Fantasy V, I can't pretend that this isn't overall a perfect 16-bit JRPG. My rating for Final Fantasy VI Pixel Remaster on Switch, PlayStation 4, Xbox Series X, and Windows is an S.